Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us for the Vandy's monthly webinar series. Today's webinar session will be presented by Lee Godby, the Director of Business Development at Idaptive. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I'd like to remind you to visit our website, vandys.com/events, for a list of upcoming webinars and in-person events. If you're in a noisy environment, we please ask that you mute your phone or computer to eliminate background noise for everyone else. Lastly, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask them at any time, or you can type them in the message window. With that being said, I'll now turn it over to Lee to begin the presentation.
All right. Hey, thank you, Martha and Valerie. Appreciate the opportunity to present today. As Martha was saying, my name is Lee Godby. I'm the Director of Business Development at Idaptive, and excited to present today. So we've changed the title a little bit, but the content is still relevant and the same as the original title. But today we're going to be talking about enhancing your zero trust approach to access management with context and risk. What we'd like to do is start off with a picture. I'll give you a second to kind of take that in, think about what you're looking at right now, figure out what's going on here. We see Darth Vader, we see a body of water, we see a pitcher and another jug, but we don't quite know what's going on. We think we know what's going on, but we don't know exactly what's going on. And the reason for that is context is important, right? So if we had a little bit more context, we would probably be able to describe what was going on there. And don't worry, we'll come back to that picture here at the end. But I wanted to use that to set the tone for our discussion. Before we get too far into this, I think, to back things up, we'll start with the zero trust framework. Nowadays, everybody is talking about the zero trust model and their zero trust approach. So to put things in perspective for this conversation, when we talk about zero trust from an identity perspective, we look at three key components, right? We look at verifying the user, validating their device, and then once we've done those things, intelligently limiting their access. And the reason for that, many of you are probably familiar with these statistics here. We've been using them for a while, but this is all tied to the Verizon report. But 81% of the breaches involved some type of identity component, right? It typically involved a weak or stolen password. Additionally, 10 times more breaches were related to identity type tactics versus just actual vulnerabilities. So when you think about Pareto's principle, everybody's trying to come up with ways to defeat the hacker, if you will, or the insider threat. This is a great way of getting after some of those things, by addressing those, addressing your identity technology. And so when we talk about access security within the zero trust framework, there's three things that we look at. One, we describe it this way, access to a network does not determine which service you're going to access. Access to the network just gets you into the network, but from there you've got to be able to determine who should have access to what things within that network. Secondly, access is based on what we know about you and your device. What is your role? Should you be accessing this resource or this device? And then finally, access is always tied to authentication and authorization, right? To put this in maybe a more visual description, in 2018, I deployed with a National Guard unit to Qatar, and our primary mission was fixed site security for 4 locations in the region. And our soldiers' main task every day was, as people pulled up to the gate to access the base, they had to present an ID. They had to identify themselves. So they presented their identification. So that told us who they were, but it still didn't tell us if they were authorized to access the base. So then they would take the ID and then they would reference it against what we call the BAM, the base access memo. And that would tell us if this person, Lee Godby, is authorized to enter. And once they had those two pieces validated, then they were allowed access into the base. And so, those are the three ways we go at looking at access security under the Zero Trust framework. So how do we verify users with our solutions? We've got, single sign-on. We've also got multi-factor authentication. When it comes to validating their device, we've got MFA for endpoints. We've got device and app management, as well as device security posture. So with our EMM solution and our endpoint management solutions, we can determine if those devices have the right security posture and are valid to access. One of the dilemmas that or challenges, I should say, that many organizations face is, the end user experience versus the security experience, right? Everybody, there's a trade-off. If you look at this graph here, the vertical axis is security, the horizontal axis is user experience, and everybody's looking for that silver bullet or that balance. Do you want to have security so rigorous that it's non-productive, or do you want to have the user experience to be dialed in to an extent that your security posture is poor? But what if there was a way to provide both, right? Everybody's looking for that way, and we think that by integrating risk-based authentication with context, you're going to improve the user experience while keeping your company secure. And let's look at this scenario. Right now, if you walk into a room and you see a glass of milk and chocolate chip cookies, you got a decision to make. Do you eat these cookies, right, with the milk? And from this picture, maybe, but maybe we need a little bit more context and make a decision. What if that milk has been sitting out for a couple of days, or what if those cookies are a couple of weeks old? You're not going to want to eat those. But if you had some more context, now you can make a more informed decision. Now we know that that's 2% milk. It expires in 10 days, and these are fresh chocolate chip cookies. So now you can make a decision and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I will eat those. Now that you have more context. Same thing with access events. You need more context for access events. Where are they logging in from? When are they logging in? What type of devices are they logging in with? And those type of things. These all provide you context about that one access event. So when you think about this equation, risk context plus condition equals action, and get a little bit more granular, and you look at it this way: geo velocity is plus the condition is equal to high. Now you can make a decision: do I deny them access, or do I just prompt them for with MFA and make them provide another form of validation? We've all been through this scenario, right? You've got an MFA solution that maybe is, the policies are set to where they have to be prompted every time they log into an app, and it really does lead to a poor experience. And many of us have probably felt like this diagram here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, right? I'll let that finish out. What if you could take a solution such as ours, and now you have a model that allows you to provide that user experience without sacrificing the risk, right? You've got the access request. And with our analytics service running in the background and generating a risk score on that user, now you've got some more context, and you can make a decision. Hey, do I allow them to access the application, or do I need to prompt them for a little bit more, prompt them with MFA and make them provide a little bit more context? Or, if you want to be real strict about it, you can deny them access. But, we think with option 1 and 2, it provides for a better user experience without sacrificing that risk. And then you have a situation like this where when you close out those applications, but you've got the context and you know this person is still logging in from the same location, so there's no reason to prompt them with MFA, or you get a better user experience. So as we talk to organizations, everybody's in a different state of their maturity model. When we break this out, what we've just defined and described is we see it as 3 levels to this maturity model. The first one being policy driven. It's can be very complex, very arduous. You have a policy for everything. And then you extrapolate that across every application. It gets very complex and hard to manage. And then as organizations are growing and they're bringing other, they're acquiring other organizations and they're trying to bring them into their environment, it gets really complex. But then if you graduate that model to a more contextual and policy-driven model, it becomes more flexible and more pliable. But then, with the ultimate goal of getting to something that's AI powered, we use machine learning in our analytics service. We're getting to where it's going to be unsupervised and autonomous. It's going to be very intelligent, very insightful. Today, we have machine learning models that can provide that context, and we're graduating to that AI powered version of it. But it becomes a very learning and evolving environment. And ultimately, it's going to maintain the proper security levels, but it's also going to give your users that desired experience to maintain their productivity. So when you look at our user behavior analytics, right now, we're leveraging the machine learning to develop those behavior profiles. Within those behavior profiles, now we can make some real-time decisions and be able to assess that user. And what that does, as I've reiterated a number of times so far throughout this webinar, is it gives you a comprehensive risk profile that allows you to make intelligent decisions without limiting their access. You can provide the multi-factor authentication if if their risk score is elevated due to some type of event, and validate that user is who he or she said they were. So as you start building this profile, what it looks like is you're taking into account all these various contextual things, right? Geolocation, geovelocity, their IP address, the event source, those types of things, and you're starting to build a historical context around that user. And based on their profile, now you kind of understand their user behavior, and you have a profile associated with that user, and you can make decisions. One of the things that we're doing now as well is we're integrating with third parties. So we make that part of that context. So today we're integrated with Palo Alto Networks, and we can receive their third-party threat intelligence from Cortex. Cortex can send us events from their Cortex data lake. We can ingest that, and we can factor that in as one of the factors that we build into their profile. So as an event occurs, if that causes their score to elevate, we can then prompt them for multi-factor authentication when they go to access their applications. The other key components to this risk analytics service that we have, that we call Adaptive MFA, is we're able to gather insights from multiple sources. We can gather them from applications. We can gather them from endpoints, and that's what makes us truly unique when you look at other identity providers out there. There's a lot of great solutions, but one of the things that makes us unique is the fact that we do have an endpoint management capability as well as an EMM solution built into our services. And so we're able to get information from those endpoints and those mobile devices and factor that into our risk scoring. Additionally, we're able to investigate these security incidents, and we're able to respond to those security incidents. One of the things that we would highlight is that we have a rich amount of displays that we can leverage. And so you can get strong reporting. You can visualize this through a lot of the graphs and graphics that we can produce with these reports. And so, tying this back into the Zero Trust framework and looking at verifying every user, you now with risk analytics have a very strong way to validate that user. You've got a lot of context around who that user is, where they're logging in from, when they typically log in, and now you can make smarter decisions to intelligently limit their access. Again, we'd like to highlight the single sign-on capability, the multi-factor authentication capability, but what really drives the back end of that is the user behavior analytics. So looking back at the Zero Trust maturity model, again, everybody's at different stages. We run into organizations all the time that may have multiple MFA technology that they're using. They may be using RSA for some things. They may be using some other MFA capabilities for other things. But a lot of these things are very, very rigid. They're not very reactive. They're very policy driven. And so what we're seeing is people are going through digital transformation. They're looking for that next horizon when it comes to access control. And I think that's one thing that we definitely bring to the table for a number of organizations is our ability now to be flexible by providing context and blending that with risk and being able to make intelligent decisions about who can access what. So let's just, we'll end it with this and we'll tie it back to our picture with Darth Vader here. And we'll provide you a little bit more context. This is a project that was done in Bulgaria back in the early part of 2000. This is Darth Vader. He's trying to clean the Black Sea with his Brita purifier, and he's pouring what he calls purified water into the jugs, and then ultimately he was pouring those jugs back into the Black Sea. So not sure that he accomplished his goal in terms of purifying the Black Sea, but you now have some context around that picture. One thing I'd like to point you to, if I've said anything that has piqued your interest, or if you've got more questions or you would like to test drive our solution, I'd like to point you to our trial page at idaptive.com/free trial. You can go there, set it up. It's very easy. It's frictionless to get started, and then you'll be able to start playing around with our services. If you have any questions, I'm available for questions. I'd love to point you to our Vandus reps as well to work with them to coordinate these free trials as well. And thank you.
Lee, thank you so much for that. So this session will be recorded and will be sent out to you guys. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you, everybody, for your time.